Great to be here today. Welcome everyone. I'm really looking forward to the next 60 minutes and sharing with you 7 specific strategies on how you can not only read faster, but learn quicker. Remember the things that you're actually reading. I'm going to jump straight in because I've got a lot that I want to share with you. So let me give you a quick preview of the 7 strategies that we'll be covering. And as Alex said, I'm going to ask you to get involved here. This is very interactive, so it's not really a passive listening experience. You should have a pen and paper in front of you, and you should also have a book that we're going to refer to throughout the session. So let me just give you a quick preview of the 7 strategies. First of all, we're going to talk a little bit about the mindset you need to be in when you're speed reading. Then I'm going to look at how can you prime yourself to be interested and notice the things that are going to be important to you as you read a book. We're going to talk a little bit about your vision and how your eyes work and your peripheral vision, how you can get those involved to improve your performance. And we're going to also talk about previewing. How do you create a map of the things that you're going to read, and then how do you probe into that information? And then we get to the good stuff. In fact, it's all good stuff, but we get to the actual stuff that I'm sure a lot of you are really interested in, is how do you actually read quicker? How do you actually consume more information in a faster amount of time? And then finally, we'll have a look at how do you make this stuff stick in your mind so that you can actually use it, because obviously you want to put things into practice. Now, I said it was going to be interactive. Alex has volunteered to be my guinea pig here, shall we say. So thank you for that, Alex. So for each one of the exercises, the activities, I've asked Alex to play along with me. So he's going to be playing along. Now, what I'd like you to do is when I ask Alex for some feedback, listen to his feedback. And if you're playing along at the same time, I want you to compare your experience. Notice things that are the same, but also notices the different experiences that you might have had. And that way you'll get a much deeper learning experience. Right, let's get started. So, I was on the bus last week with a good friend of mine. His name was Tristan. And I was talking about doing this seminar today, doing this webinar. And we were having this conversation, and Tristan said to me, he said, Mark, why would you want to speed read though? And I thought, okay, that's an interesting question. Why would you want to do it? And I thought, well actually, I think about reading in general in a couple of different ways. And I always kind of liken it to taking a trip, taking a journey. So I live in Sevenoaks, and let's say I was taking a trip from Sevenoaks to Brighton. Depending on my purpose, what I wanted to get out of that trip, I might choose a different mode of transport. So let's say I just want to get from A to B as quickly as possible. And let's say I had some chores I had to do when I got to Brighton, pick a few things up, and then work my way back. If I was going to do that, more than likely, I would want to take the car. And I'd want to drive down there, get there as quick as possible, and do the things that I needed to do. I would have a specific purpose. Now, on the other hand, let's say it was the summer, it's a nice sunny day, and I decide that me and a group of my friends want to go out and we want to cycle. We want to take in the view, you want to take in the scenery. More than likely, I might use my bike. I'm not going to take my car. We want to savor the scenery. You could think of reading in the same way. If I was going to read a John Grisham book, I quite like John Grisham, then I'm not going to want to speed read. I'm going to want to create the scenes in the book as clearly as possible. I might even want to imagine that I'm one of the characters in the book. So I'm going to read in a different way. If, however, I was reading, let's say, a book by Howard Gardner about multiple intelligences, I may want to get through that book really quickly and just pick out the key information that's going to help me achieve a specific goal. Likewise, if you're taking an exam and you've got a bunch of exam books and a bunch of reference material that you need to get up to speed on, you're going to want to get through that stuff as quick as possible. You're going to want to get from A to B, pick up the important points so you can remember them and put them into practice. So when you're speed reading, it's good to think of it in this way, getting from A to B and picking up those points. So what we're going to do is we're just going to try and get you into the right mindset for speed reading. So Alex, you're going to play along with me here, and everyone else, as you're listening, I'd just like you to write down and answer questions that I'm going to ask you. So Alex, on your piece of paper here, could you draw a horizontal line? And at one end of the line, write the number 0, and at the other end of the line, write the number 10. Good. Right, now hopefully everyone now has a line with a 0 and a 10 on it. Now, as you look at the number 10, what I'd like you to do is imagine it's 6 months in the future. So you're going to transport yourself into the future and imagine you've been living with the ability to read faster and learn quicker for 6 months. Okay, now what I want you to describe to me is what are the kind of things that you can do when you're at 10. Just write down a few keywords. Write down a few keywords there. And everyone else, just write down the kind of things that you're able to do in 6 months' time. And that's what that number 10 represents. So maybe, or you can obviously read quicker. Maybe you've passed certain exams because you can read at that speed and you can learn much quicker and absorb information. For other people, maybe it's about your work. Just write down a few keywords. What you're trying to do here is build up a picture of what that future might look like. Okay, now let's look at the number 0, and let's imagine, let's say that the number 0 was your reading ability when you were 12 years old. Okay, now whatever that was, you don't need to go into any detail there, I don't want you to write anything down. Just imagine 0 is your reading ability at 12. Now what I'd like you to do is along that line from 0 to 10, write down the number you're at right now. Some people actually go into negative numbers here. It's quite interesting. Alex isn't. It's okay. Okay. And just write down a few keywords of what is that, describe what is that 5 or 6 like right now. So Alex has got a 5 or 6 here. So just write a few keywords that describe the kind of things that you can do, and maybe also some of the challenges that you have. And just write those down now. Now, thinking about the scale, the final thing I would like you to do is think about what would you like to walk away with in the next 50 minutes? What specifically would you like to take away from this webinar in the next 50 minutes? And just write that down now. Okay, so everyone else, you should have something written down for 10. You know what 0 is, something written down for where you are now, and also what you want to walk away with. I'm just going to hand over to Alex here, and can you just give us a quick summary of what you've got written down? And everyone else, just do a little comparison to what Alex has and to what you have.
So yeah, I've got the scale in front of me, 0 to 10. I put myself down as a 5 to 6 because I don't read quickly, but I think there's a lot of room for improvement because I've never done anything like this. I would love to be able to consume things quicker. For example, emails. I know we all get a lot of emails in professional jobs. Love to be able to, there's a few exams and tests coming up, so I'd love to be able to prepare for those quickly and not have to revisit things as often. And the place, what I'd like to get out of the session today, like everyone in the audience, is to maybe boost my 5 to 6 to a 7 to 9 and have the confidence that I can read quickly and remember things. Because when I read quickly at the minute, I feel like I'm not remembering everything.
Excellent, brilliant, that's fantastic. So what you've done here is you've set yourself up a mindset, and you've also set yourself a direction, which is great. And so I'm going to try and get you to that 7, 8 today, or at least have the ability to take yourself there. Priming. So priming is very interesting. Let me describe this. Have you ever had that feeling, you know, when you were a kid and you'd walk downstairs, maybe it was Christmas or it was your birthday, and then you see all those presents there, and then you wonder what's inside. And you get that kind of curiosity and that excitement. When you prime yourself, and I'll go into a bit of detail what priming is. When you prime yourself, you want to get yourself into this state. You want to get yourself into a state where you're very, very curious. Because when you're curious, your attention raises and your concentration raises. Now, have you ever had that experience where, let's say, you buy an item, right? You buy an item, and before you buy it, you don't really notice them around. And then all of a sudden, the day you buy it, everyone has one. Right? This happened with my iPhone 5. I got an iPhone 5, I don't know, it must have been maybe a couple of weeks after they came out, or at least so I thought. Now, I hadn't really noticed a lot of them around, but as soon as I bought one, suddenly everyone had them. On the train, I noticed them everywhere. I was basically primed. My brain was interested, and it was subconsciously looking out for similar items. So what we can do when we're reading to read more effectively is to prime our brain. And so what we're going to do now is a short activity where Alex and everyone else who's listening, you're going to prime yourself. And the way you prime yourself is to ask yourself a question. Now, to give you another example, let's just say I was going to remember a name. I want to remember someone's name. Before I even met someone, I would ask myself a question. Now, I do this subconsciously now. I don't even think about it. It just happens. But when I meet someone, I go, what's interesting about this person? Now, if you ask yourself that question, what's interesting, you start to look at them in a whole different way. And you start to notice more about them. So you can do exactly the same with a book. Before you even read the book, and I'm going to get Alex to do this here, and I'm going to get everyone else to do this as well, as you're looking at the book in front of you, whatever book you have, so you don't even need to open it up yet, you can just need to keep it closed, and you can just ask yourself, okay, what could be interesting about this book? And as you ask yourself that question, maybe just make a few notes, and just take a guess. Even if you haven't read it, ask yourself, what could be interesting about this book? And just make a few notes. Ask yourself, what might this book give me? What might it offer me? If the book is going to help you with an exam, you might ask yourself, how will this book help me pass an exam? And what you're doing here is you're priming your brain. You're priming your brain to look out for information which is going to be either important, relevant, or maybe just of interest to you. So I'm just going to pass over to Alex again. I just wouldn't mind just you summarizing what you've written down over here.
Right, so I've looking at this front page of your book, Mark, I'm just thinking I'd quite like to become that elephant, just because the memory is so great. Obviously, that's the stereotype of the elephant. Remembering anything is quite a powerful title, and forgetting things can be really embarrassing. So I'd love to be able to remember things. You use names as a great example. Forgetting someone's name is it's terrible, isn't it, sometimes? And also just to generally improve. That's what's interesting about this. It looks like there's lots of room to learn something.
Brilliant. Okay, that's great. So what you've done there is you've got a few high-level ideas about what you're going to get from the book. So you've got yourself curious. You're almost starting to get yourself to that state, maybe not quite, but you know when you're a kid and you open your presents, and the more you can create that, the better. So your brain is now primed, and it's going to look out for stuff. Now, there's something else that you can do to prime your brain. And you don't need to do this every single time you read a book, so don't think you do. However, let's say you have a book which is quite heavy in terminology, or maybe it's quite heavy in facts and data. You may want to prime yourself to a higher level. Now, to prime yourself to a higher level, a couple of simple things that you can do is either you memorize the table of contents. Now, if anyone's listened to the webinar I did last year, you'll know there are specific techniques that allow you to do that pretty quickly, and we're going to demonstrate that in a second. Or you may want to pick out specific terminology in the book, maybe in the index or on the back, there's some terminology, and those are the kind of things that are going to trip you up once you start reading through the book. So you may want to memorize a few of those key facts very, very quickly using a simple memory strategy. So we're gonna put this into practice here, and everyone else, you can play along with it. So what I'm going to ask you to do is just imagine the story I'm going to tell you in your mind as clear as you can. Now, there are several images in this story, and each image represents just a key theme in the book How to Remember Anything. Yeah, and so what you're doing here, just almost setting up a framework in your mind that will allow you to go, what was the first thing? Oh, it was about memory, and then you can talk about it, and it'll naturally bring back information to you. So let's try this out. So everyone else, just imagine what I say to you in your mind. Are you ready? Good. So imagine there's a very large computer, and it's obviously got a good memory, this computer, lots of memory in there. And this computer is riding a bicycle. It's riding a bicycle. Now, when you look at the wheels of this bicycle, you'll notice there's a big flashing light bulb in the center of the wheel. This light bulb flies off and it lands, bang, right in the middle of a very old book. And there's lots of stories in this book. And it's also a little bit angry, this book. So you want to get a rusty chain. You take this chain and you start tying the book together. You don't want it to escape. And you take this rusty chain and then you attach it onto a big spider's web. It's a network of webs. And then stuck on this web is a big number 2. So number 2 is also blue. And you take off this number 2, you grab it, and you place it down on top of a map you have in front of you. And it almost acts as one of those weights, those paper weights. And then the last thing you do is you take a huge chopstick and you start stabbing the map. I don't know why, you just are. You're just stabbing this map. You're probably marking out some points on the map. Right, we're going to do a little test now, Alex, and I'm going to see how many of those things you remember. And as you're listening, see if you can get there before Alex does. Okay, here goes.
Right, so the story I can remember is a computer which is on top of a bike, and a light falls off the bike wheel and lands on the ground, and that then has a storybook, and then the storybook is wrapped with a rusty chain, which is then onto a spider's web, and there's a blue number 2, and then the blue number 2 lands onto a map, and then you start stabbing the map with a chopstick. There we go.
Brilliant, excellent, well done. So you can see that's a chain method. It's a very, very simple technique, and with practice you can become very, very quick at creating these little chains. And effectively what you've done is you've memorized not everything in the table of contents, but quite a lot in the table of contents of that book. And each picture represents a word. So the computer, that's about memory. The bike, that's about what we call the learning cycle. The light bulb represents creativity. That's about creative memorization. Then you've got a book which references reference stories, and so on and so on. So each picture represents a word. Now what this means is, when we haven't even started reading yet, by the way, but before we even start reading, you've got a good sense of what this book is about. And you could actually guess in your head, you could go, okay, what might be in that memory section? And you're going to come up with some ideas. You may be right, may be wrong. Doesn't matter, because what you continue to do here is prime your brain to look for the interesting, relevant, useful material which you can then use. So have you ever been at a party? Let's say you're at a party, and you probably don't notice this because you're doing it, but if you see someone who you think is attractive at a party, what tends to happen with your eyes is that your pupils will dilate. They dilate because you've suddenly become very interested. And when you become interested, you let in more light. Your pupils will also dilate if you turn the lights down, because they're letting more light in. Their pupils will also dilate if there's a danger situation, so that fight or flight situation, because immediately you go into that mode where you need to take in everything around you very, very quickly. And so what is actually happening here is that in your retina, in each eye, you have about 130 million light receptors. So about 260 million light receptors in total. Now, when you read a book, what generally happens is that you're only using about 20% of those light receptors because you're very, very focused on one point. So therefore, you're not engaging 80% of those light receptors. And with speed reading, what we try to do is encourage you to engage more of those receptors. And by engaging more of those receptors, you let in more light, therefore you let in more information. It's quite a tricky thing to do when you're actually reading because it goes against everything you've ever done in the past. So what we're going to do here, I'm going to do this with Alex, and if you're sitting listening to this, ideally you get someone to do this for you, but you can do it on your own. And what we're going to do, and just play along with this as we're doing it, and I'm looking at Alex right now, and I've taken my fingers, my 2 forefingers, and I've joined the tips together, and it's forming a horizontal line. And my fingers are about 10 centimeters in front of Alex's nose. Now, Alex, what I'm going to ask you to do is look directly at me. So you look at my face. And if you're listening, just look in front of you. So you don't want to look at your fingers, otherwise you go a bit cross-eyed, right? So you want to look in front of you, but just have your fingers 10 centimeters in front of your nose. And now what I'm going to do is, as you're looking at me, or you're looking straight ahead, start to slowly wiggle your fingers and pull them apart. Now, as soon as one of the fingers disappears from your vision, say stop. Okay, so you guys can't see this listening, but hopefully you've got to a point where you've also stopped. This might be, I don't know, maybe just over a foot. I'm guessing that. That's all right. We'll say it's a foot, right? We'll use that as the benchmark. Now what we're going to do is we're going to try and improve that. Now, this technique can be quite challenging when you first work with it, because it kind of goes against everything you've learned. And in certain cases, you will naturally do this, but when you're reading, etc., it's just completely foreign. What I'm going to ask you to do is, and this is a little bit silly, you might feel a bit funny doing this, but just play with it. I'm going to ask you to imagine you're wearing a party hat. Okay, so you're wearing a party hat, but it's like this, it's pointed. It's quite long and it's pointed. So you're wearing a party hat at the back of your head there, and the tip is way back behind you. Now, we're going to try the exercise again. So if you're playing along with this, join your fingers together again, look straight ahead, and put your fingers about 10 centimeters in front of your nose. However, this time, you want to engage your peripheral vision. So I want you to put your awareness, and this is very important, put your awareness back to the tip of that hat. So you look forward, you look at me, but there's some part of your brain, your awareness, which is focusing on that point back there. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to wiggle my fingers, and if you're listening, wiggle your fingers and start to open them apart. And look at me, but keep your awareness back there. And tell me when you can't see my fingers again. Tell me when to stop. Okay, you haven't seen this, but we've literally gone about twice as far here. I'm looking over Marie. Marie's saying over there. So we're going about twice as far. We're not making this up. So what you've done here is you've started to engage your peripheral vision. Now, this technique, that strategy, is very challenging when you first start, but I guarantee you work with this for a couple of weeks, it starts to become instinctive. And what it means for reading is that you'll let in more light, and therefore you'll take in more information naturally. This leads us on to previewing. Now bear in mind, so far, you haven't even read the book yet, but you're at a place now where you've got a great mindset. You've primed yourself, you're interested, you've got some good questions. You've also learned how you can engage your peripheral vision. Now you can do all this in a matter of seconds. If you walk in a bookstore, if you walk into a library, everything we've done so far in the last 15, 20 minutes, you can do instantly. Previewing, you all do this. Everyone does this. Like I said, you go into a library, first thing you do, you'll pick up a book and you'll flick through it. What we're going to do here, though, and we're going to do this in real time, and I'm going to give everyone 60 seconds, is you're going to preview the book that you have in front of you. However, this time, you're doing it being primed. So you want to get yourself in that curious state and think about what this book is going to give you. And you also want to try and engage that peripheral vision. So if you can start now, everyone start now, and just start flicking through the book up one page at a time. And just give yourself a nice rhythm here. And just speed up a little bit, and you're not trying to remember anything here. This is really important. You just want to get a sense of the book. You want to get a sense of what it's about. What you don't want to do is stop and start reading anything. Just flick through the book, a page at a time, get yourself into a nice rhythm, and start to notice things that pop out. Areas where you think, oh, that's interesting. And that's something you're going to come back to. So what you're doing here while you're previewing is you're starting to mentally make some markers on your map. The map, this journey you're going to take through the book, you're mentally starting to make some markers. So just flick through. I'll give you 10 more seconds. Keep on going. Good. So just stop there, wherever you are in the book. Now, the flip side to previewing is to probe. And so now what I'm going to ask everyone to do is to make some notes around what do you think the book you've just previewed was about. And this is not about memory. I don't want you to remember everything in the book. What stood out for you? What was interesting? You may just have one thing. You may have 3 things. There may be 20. Just start to make a note of what was interesting in the book. What might have been about? How might you use it? Now, when you're probing, the things you want to avoid are asking negative questions. So a lot of us will go, I didn't remember anything. None of it made any sense. And as soon as you do that, your brain will take what you say to it very, very literally. And it will shut down. It will stop searching for information. You want to turn on your internal search engine. And you do that by asking good questions and really expect to get some answers. You know, what was the book about? Where could I use it? What did I miss in the book? What did I get in the book that I may not have noticed before? And you want to try and play a little game with your mind. Okay, we'll just stop there. So Alex, I'm going to go to you, and from previewing and probing, I just want you to give me a little summary of.
So I flicked about halfway through the book in the time you gave me, Mike. I noticed that there were lots of popular names in there, so I saw lists of famous films, saw words like Shakespeare. I was interested by things that I didn't know about. I remember the term chunking. It was quite large on one of the pages. I remember reading a bit about author, and I saw some pictures of different people in there. There seemed to be quite a few lists, but I didn't have time to consume them. And I remember the words double/triple, and also there were things about your ability and your learning. So I guessed it was obviously about something to do with picking up something new, but I didn't really get much more than that.
Okay, that's excellent. So what you've done here is literally you've previewed in under 60 seconds, and you've got this, what you've got written down there is really accurate. So you've got a really good sense of what might be in this book. So if we just do a little recap where we've gone so far, you've got a great mindset. You've been able to prime yourself, so ask some questions to be interested. You've engaged your peripheral vision. You've previewed the book, and then you've done some probing. Now, it's taken us about just over 20 minutes to do this. Like I say, you can do this very, very quickly. All of that can happen in 2 to 3 minutes once you get it into your body. And so you've most likely got a better understanding now before you even start reading than you would have done if you just picked up a book from a library. And you've also got a clear purpose as well, something you want to get from this book. So now we move on to the reading part. And what I'd like you to do, and everyone listening, is benchmark your current reading speed. So I want you to open up your book to a page. Now, ideally, it'll be a page which has lots of text in it, not so many pictures. And first of all, work out the average number of words in a line. So to do this, count the total number of words across 3 lines. So do that now, count the total number of words, and then just divide that by 3. So that will give you the average number of words per line. Usually it ends up somewhere between 12 and 15. Now in a moment, I'm going to let you read for 60 seconds. It's important that you do read, otherwise it's just going to go very quiet for 60 seconds. And after you finish reading, you're going to count up the total number of lines that you've went through. Now it's important when you're doing this, just read at your normal speed. Just read how you would normally read. Are you ready? You ready, Alex? Good. Okay, I'll give you a 3, 2, 1 count and then go. 3, 2, 1, go. Thirty seconds left. Ten seconds left. Okay, stop. Now count up the total number of lines that you got through. And then you want to times that number by the average number of words. So if you got through 20 lines, 20 times 12 would be 240. The average reading speeds tends to be between 240 to 340 words per minute. If you just want to gauge where you are across that line right now. So I'm going to go to Alex and ask him what his current reading speed is.
So I got through 24 lines times 12 is 288.
Okay, so that's excellent. So that's kind of around the average speed, so 240, 340. You're kind of in that average band, which is great. So what we want to do is we want to improve that, and we may even try and double it in the next 10 minutes, okay? And this will vary, you know, your reading speed, people listening right now. So there's your benchmark. Now, 2 things tend to happen, generally. 2 problems occur when you're reading. The first one is called regression. Now, regression is when, you know, when you're reading and you think, I've missed a bit, and then you consciously jump back. So that happens to everyone, right? We've all experienced what that feels like. And then the other thing that we experience, the other challenge, is called backskipping. And backskipping, we're not even aware that it happens. We're reading, and all of a sudden we backskipped. And then we're kind of reading the same thing again. There's some weird kind of deja vu going on. But that happens subconsciously. So we're not aware that those things are happening. So you've got backskipping and you've got regression. The strategy I'm going to share with you now helps to overcome those problems. So if you think back to when you were a kid, and I don't know, I'm not too sure if they still do this now, but I know at least when I was young, you know, 4, 5, 6, learning to read, one of the things that I did when I was reading a book is I would use my finger. I would use my finger to guide my eyes underneath the sentence. This is actually a genius strategy, but for some reason, what happens is you get to a certain age, probably just sometime after 6, and you start being told to stop using your finger because that's not how you read. And then what starts to happen is, because of how your eyes move, and I'm going to demonstrate this in a moment, they don't move smoothly across the page as they do when you guide, and they start jumping around, and therefore you start to miss words, and therefore regression starts to happen, and you go back and you go, what was that? Regression can also happen if you don't understand a word, but it generally just happens because you miss something, and that's when backskipping occurs as well. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to do a little demonstration with Alex to how your eyes move, and I'm then going to get you, Alex, to give some feedback to everyone else and just explain what is happening as you look at my eyes. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to draw a big imaginary circle with my eyes. And all I would like you to do, Alex, is watch my eyes very closely and notice the movement. Notice how they move. Here goes. So I'm starting to draw a circle with my eyes. And I've done it. Did you get that? Good. Now, second thing we're going to do is, can I ask you to use your finger and draw an imaginary circle for me? And this time, I'm going to watch your finger. I'm going to use your finger as a guide for my eyes. Off you go. Okay, excellent. Alex is drawing a big circle with his finger. I'm going to pass over to you and can give us some feedback as to what you saw happen.
The first time when Mark was just making a circle with his eyes, they were jumping almost like a clock with the second hand as it ticks round. Whereas the second time when Mark was following my finger round, like he was, his eyes were following and tracking my finger in a smooth motion rather than the ticking of the clock, which is what the eyes were doing before. That's what I noticed anyway.
Excellent, exactly. So it's really obvious that when you weren't guiding, my eyes were jumping all over the place. And when you guided, all of a sudden, my eyes move really, really smoothly. So what we want to do is go back to the technique we used when we were kids. And we want to use a guide. Now, you can use your finger as a guide, or if that doesn't feel quite right using your finger, then maybe use a pen. Or my preference is a chopstick, and I've actually brought a chopstick in for Alex, so you can use a chopstick as a guide. And the reason I use a chopstick is because they're slightly longer, and you can hold the book slightly further away, so when you start to engage your peripheral vision, you take in even more information. And the technique you're going to try right now, and everyone's going to try this, is I will give you another 60 seconds, and you, in a moment, you can start reading from the point where you last stopped. And this time, you're going to guide your eyes. Now, the way you do this is you start about one word in from the sentence, and you just guide your eyes using your chopstick or your pen underneath each sentence. And then when you get to the end of the sentence, just before the last word, you come down to the next line. And then you repeat. So you can see a pattern on the right-hand side of the screen. Now, rather than thinking about speed, what you should think about here is rhythm. This will set up a different feeling, and you want to initially have a nice, easy rhythm, and then you gradually increase the rhythm. Now, because you're guiding your eyes, there'll be a lot less back skipping happening. And because this is the first time that you're doing it, what I'm going to ask you to do on this one is go a little bit faster than is comfortable. Does that make sense? Okay, so everyone get your books in front of you, get your guide ready. We're going to do 60 seconds. 3, 2, 1, go. 30 seconds. 10 seconds. And stop. Okay, so count up the total number of lines and then times that by the average number. Now, generally what happens here is that you'll find you read a lot more words. The word per minute goes up. However, your comprehension probably dropped. That's perfectly natural. In the beginning, what you're trying to do here is train your brain to become accustomed to a different pattern. So in the beginning, most likely, not for everyone, sometimes comprehension increases straight away, but for a lot of people, the comprehension will drop. It's completely natural for that to happen. So I'm just looking over at Alex now, and Alex, I'm going to pass over to you, and if you could tell me what your number was, but also just give us a little bit of feedback on your experience.
Right, so first time round, I did 288 in total. This time I did 468 in total, which was 39 lines. I definitely felt that I was pushing myself, like you said, to make sure that I was getting through the lines, but definitely the guide helped. And it also helped counting the lines as well.
Brilliant. Dual purpose. So many things. Great. So there was an increase there. Now that's generally, I mean, you didn't almost double, but it was almost there. It's lifting up. So guiding is the first technique. And if there was one technique I'd ask people to walk away with today, it would be guiding. Start putting it back into practice. Now, what may have happened, and over my experience, and I've worked with people for about 15, 20 years on speed reading and memory techniques, is that there's some beliefs that pop up. What I'd like you to do right now is write down any negative thought or belief that you notice right now about speed reading, or just go through that guiding technique specifically. Write down anything that came up that you maybe thought, you know what, I just don't work this way. My brain doesn't work this way. Or you may go, you know what, I did that and I didn't remember anything. Pick out one negative thought and just write it down for me. One negative thought that came up that maybe was you feel might slow you down, or maybe it was getting in your way, or maybe it completely blocked you feel, from moving forward and really being able to play that exercise out. And now what I'd like to do, if you've got that written down now, which hopefully you do, is I would like you to flip it. And what I mean by flip it is, what would be the opposite of that thought, that belief? What would be the complete opposite of that? So if you said that, you know, my brain just doesn't work this way, maybe you have a belief that says, you know what, my brain was built for speed reading. Whatever it is, just flip it to the complete opposite. Now, if you're a coach, if you're an athletic coach and you work with athletes, nowadays, coaching, for about 40% of that coaching is all focused on your thoughts, your belief, and your mindset. The other 60% is all the physical stuff that goes on. But as a coach, most of it is all about getting your mind in the right place. And speed reading is no different. You have to get your mind in the right place, because you're essentially trying to rewire years and years and years of doing something in a specific way. So what I'm going to do here, I just want to flip back over to Alex, and can you just tell me, one, the belief that you had, and what was it once you'd flipped it?
Right, so the belief I had was I might be reading more, but I think I'm remembering less. So to flip that round, I might be reading more, but I'm remembering more.
It almost sounds too simple, right? But what I want you to do, we're going to do another 60 seconds. We're going to go straight into this. So get your book out, another 60 seconds, and imagine right now, and really go with it, if you lived with that belief, if that was a belief that you had right now, you know, as speedrunning, you're going to remember more. Work with that belief, and also, as you're doing this, make sure that you're guiding and make sure you're primed and you're using your peripheral vision. Here we go. Another 60 seconds. 3, 2, 1, go. 30 seconds. Ten seconds. Okay, stop, count up your lines, times the total number of lines by the average number of words. Let's wait for Alex to count these up. So just count them up and then make your multiplication and see what you come out with. I'm just going to go back to Alex here. And again, just tell me what your word count is now and just your experience.
So the word count now is 516, and that equates to 43 lines. The first time I did it of the three, I got 288. So yeah, I felt this time that I was remembering more of the key words, and I was getting a better picture in my head of what I was consuming. Even though I was consuming it quicker, I felt that I was building up a picture and a story of what the paragraphs were saying.
Okay, that's brilliant. That's a great explanation, because what you've said there is that thing about getting a picture. And it's going to be different for everyone, but you're starting to make some connections here. There's keywords coming out, it's forming pictures, and essentially what should be happening now is you're increasing your speed, but also some of that comprehension is coming back. We're going to go straight into something called relativistic training now. And this is going to take you to a whole other level. Now, if you imagine, first of all, let's imagine we're driving a car. It's on the motorway. You're driving the car and you're going at 90 miles per hour. Now, there's a turning just off to the left, and I ask you to take the turning. You take the turning, and then I slam my hand in front of the speedometer, and I ask you to slow down to 30 miles per hour. Everyone right now, write down how fast do you think you would be going after I ask you to slow down to 30 miles an hour if you couldn't see the speedometer. Write down a number. You were at 90 miles an hour. I ask you to go at 30. Where do you think you'd actually end up? Okay, and I'm just going to ask Alex to tell me what he's got there.
I've got 45, Mark.
Okay, 45 miles an hour. So it's going to be faster. Now, generally, this people ranges from 60 miles an hour to kind of 40 miles an hour. And the reason why is because you'll be going so fast, going at 45 actually feels like 30. So this is another technique that coaches use with training athletes. They push them further than is possible until they basically fall over, and then at that point, when they're actually performing for real, they've got much more in the tank. And this is what you want to do. So what I'm going to ask you now is, we're not going to time this, but just as I'm talking, start using your guide and reading through the book that you have in front of you. But this time, start now. And as you're guiding, I want you to increase your rhythm faster and faster until you start to lose comprehension. And then as you start to lose comprehension, I want you to increase the rhythm so you go faster still. And really start to push this. And what will happen is you'll start to lose more comprehension. Keep on going faster and faster until all comprehension is gone. Do this for the next 10 seconds, so even faster. Move your guide even faster. There should be zero comprehension. Okay, good. Stop there. So straight away, I'm going to give you 60 seconds, and I want you to now use your guide at a speed that feels comfortable. Also, this is the last one we're going to do. Try and engage your peripheral vision. Try and be nice and relaxed, and try and look for the things that are interesting inside the book, and also take that strong belief that this is going to work for you. 3, 2, 1, go. 30 seconds. Ten seconds. And stop. So count up the total number of lines and see what answer you get. Now, while Alex is doing this, I'm going to move on to the next slide here. So far, you've primed yourself, you've got your peripheral involved, you've got a great mindset, you've previewed, you've probed, and you've also learned how you can actually move your eyes quicker in order to absorb more information. In order to make all this stuff stick, we can use something called SAVI. SAVI stands for somatic, which is about getting your physical senses involved. So it's very kinesthetic. Auditory is about remembering what you said or what kind of things you might say. Visual is also about creating pictures. And intellectual is about getting your brain involved in such a way that it sees the big picture, that you allow it to connect patterns, and that you question it. And so everything we're doing here to make it stick is essentially doing some more probing. So just before I give you the strategy and that, I just want to come back to Alex. And Alex, can you just give us the last number that you had there and what that felt like?
Right, Mark, I had 660 words, which was 55 lines times 12. I did feel like I was taking it more in. I was trying to be positive about it. I did backskip a few times because I was trying to comprehend what was being said on a particular line. So I did feel myself going backwards. But no, I feel like I'm getting there, but still feel like there's probably a lot of work to be done.
That's brilliant. But what's great is that even though you were back skipping there, you were going back and rereading stuff, you're still at 660 words per minute, and you feel like you're remembering some of that stuff, which is fantastic. So this last technique to make things stick, I'm not going to go into it now, but I'm going to leave you with the thought, and it's mind mapping. Now, I tend to find people, it's like Marmite for people. People either love it or they hate it. You do get a few people that go, oh, I don't mind either way. But mind mapping is fantastic for making information savvy, because it's very physical. Because when you draw the branches of a mind map, it's organic. So therefore, you're actually engaging your cerebrum, the part of the brain that deals with procedural memory and remembering things which are physical. You're engaging your auditory skills, because you have to take full sentences that you remember and you have to hone them down to one single word. It's naturally very visual, therefore it stands out and it becomes memorable. And it engages the intellectual part of your brain. So this is the frontal cortex, where all the higher thinking happens, because it allows you to see the big picture, but also make connections. So after you've read a book, ideally, you want to create a mind map. And if mind maps don't work for you, you want to do some kind of visual thinking, ideally. Quick recap. So what have we done? We've got a great mindset. You've learned how to prime yourself. You've engaged your peripheral. You know how to preview effectively, probe your brain in a positive way, and you've learned one technique which you can use, put into practice, about how to read quicker and essentially how to make that stuff stick. So the challenge now I'm going to give everyone is a 21-day challenge. And I got a picture of Nick Faldo here, because basically Nick Faldo back in the 80s, he was a great golf player, but he decided to change his swing. But in changing his swing, his game went to pot. It took him 2 years, but working on a new swing, he came back and he was stronger than ever. Reading is the same way. You're changing something which is hardwired into your body. So while it won't take 2 years, it might take 3-4 weeks to really get accustomed to this. So the challenge is, I would ask you to do some syntopic reading. And what that means is take a subject and get lots of books on that one subject. And the challenge is choose either 5 books or maybe 10 books on that one topic and apply all 7 speed reading strategies. And on top of that, take maybe just one technique and see where can you apply it in your day-to-day. You mentioned emails before. So you might want to preview that in a different way, or you might want to use some guiding. Pick up one technique that you can start to apply, and you want to do that over a 21-day period. And finally, the last question I'm going to ask you is, and this is to everyone, is on a scale of 1 to 10, write down a number right now of how committed do you think you are to following through. Write down the number, 1 to 10, 10 totally committed. Right, if you're below an 8, will you actually do it? And if you are below an 8, what might you have to do in order to bring yourself up to a 9 or a 10?
Great, thanks very much, Mark. We are running a little bit over time, but we did promise you that we would take your questions, so we'll do that. And if there's a few more that we can't get through, what we'll do is we'll post them onto the ICAW student community. So we'll write a little blog there, and this is also where you can tell us about your 21-day challenge. So Mark, straight into the first question. What are the techniques, and are there different techniques for reading on a screen versus reading printed text?
That's a really good question. It's a great question, especially now with Kindles, people with tablets and reading on mobile phones, etc. Probably there's more people doing that than reading on PCs. There are some differences and a lot of benefits actually. When it comes to previewing, for example, previewing on the screen is super simple. If you've got an iPad, you can literally just flick through that thing. You can preview at high speed, and you'll actually find, and what I find just from my own experience, is that I take in more information that way. Guiding, a little bit more challenging because you don't really want to stick a chopstick on your iPad. You want to avoid that. But what you can do is actually on if you've got a tablet, sometimes you can actually use your finger and you can guide across and it won't flip it to the next page. Or if that doesn't work, you just want to raise your finger or your guide above the screen. It's a little bit more challenging, and it's just kind of finding the technique that works for you. But I'll actually say that there's a lot of benefits to having something on a Kindle. But there is something very, very nice about just having the book. And sometimes by having the book, you feel like you've got the bigger picture. It's easier to gain the bigger picture. That makes sense.
The next question is, after reading something, how long should I give myself before I move on to the next thing, before I ruin the information that I've just read? So I guess it relates to short-term memory and how many breaks should you take when you're reading?
So got a really great question, quite a big question. There could be lots of detail there. I think initially, if you do this in topic reading memory, the challenge, so basically you get lots of book on a subject, what I suggest is do it all. Try and do it in 3 to 5 days. Read your book, and ideally you should do some kind of revision just on your notes. If you've created a mind map, maybe an hour later and then a day later, they've got the standard thing where you kind of go an hour, 1 day, 1 week. What you'll find is, though, if you read many books on one subject, is you start to make much more connections in your brain. So rather than it being harder because you're reading more, it gets easier because your brain makes more connections internally, and also it starts to think, oh, that means I could use all this stuff externally in this specific way. So actually, the more you read and the more that you put into your brain quicker, the better it can actually perform.
Okay, the next question we have is, if I use a pen to guide my eyes, it works really well for me, but will my comprehension be lower? And when will it start to improve? How long will this take?
Okay, now I think you also wrote there something about the material being denser. So yeah, so if the material is really, thick, data-driven, lots of terminology, ideally what you want to do, especially if there's going to be stuff that you're not going to understand, is maybe after previewing, is you do some more priming. And this is where I'd bring in a technique, one of the memory techniques, and I'd literally maybe create what we call a mental filing system, and I might store some of those keywords, which would allow me when I came to reading to go through the material much quicker. So go through at a good pace. However, having said that, even if you don't do that, by speed reading it initially, you're going to give yourself a sense of what the book is about, and you'll be able to hone in to those key areas in the book where you need to spend more time, where you might need to memorize some more of that data.
The next question is, can we apply speed reading techniques while reading contracts or legal documents?
That's a really good question, because you know, not that I do a lot of contracts and legal documents, but there's obviously going to be stuff in there which is very specific, I would imagine, very important for you to bring out. There's no reason that if you get good at speed reading that you can't put this into practice. It's really about, I think, priming yourself so you're really aware of where the important areas are. And if there's something in there where I guess the language is so specific that you need to be able to say it out loud, then you know there might be times when you go, I just need to talk this through so I understand exactly what it means, say it out loud. But I'd say definitely in a fast pass, use speed reading, and I think it's something you have to play with, and you have to get comfortable with, if that makes sense. But just by guiding alone, you'll stop a lot of back skipping and regression, so it should help.
And we've just got time for one more question, Mark, and it says, should I avoid tilting my book when speed reading?
Brilliant, great last question. I mean, ideally, you want to be sitting as upright as possible and have the book at eye level. So actually, you want to tilt your book so it's actually facing you if you can. So ideally, you get a stand which can be put on. That doesn't really happen generally quite a lot, but you don't want to be bent over, crunched over like an old man with a book on the table, and you know you get a bad. One, doesn't help your posture, but it also affects your breathing, how relaxed you are, and it affects other parts of your body. So ideally, sit up straight, get yourself nice and relaxed, and if you can, try and get the book as close to eye level as possible. One of the other benefits you can get if you use a PC or something.